negatives to positives, just like from the darkness we rise up, never look back, shattering barriers, breaking through every wall. No more doubts, we stand tall and proudly call the strength within us, a fire that never dies, fueling our dreams, reaching for the skies.
Hi, everybody. This is Paul Posey with the Negative to Positive Show. And today I have my good friend Chris Hampton. He is I'm going to have to let Chris tell you who he is. But we're here with the Negative to Positive Incorporated. And we're going to talk about our program with the change agents and what we're doing in the community. And so, Chris, tell the people about you, who you are, how we met, and what we've been up to.
I'm Chris Hampton. Paul and I are both veterans. We met at a veterans retreat in the Atlanta metropolitan area, and then we met again at another veterans retreat up in Maryland. And after that, we exchanged numbers, hit it off pretty good, and just been vibing ever since. Paul's one of them kind of guys who will call you with an idea, and he either wants you to help him flesh the idea out, or tell him it ain't gonna work at all. But Paul is gonna go get it anyway. So no matter what you tell him, he's gonna do it.
Yeah.
He just wants you to know where he's coming from. And so, based on that, he and I have developed a very good friendship. Paul called me with an idea, and I'll say, yeah, man, I can do it, or I can't do it, or you can do it, you can't do it, or why don't you do this? And it's been an awesome, awesome, awesome thing. I mean, Paul started off, he was just a photographer. Okay, now he's into drones, and man, we got this whole.
No, this show's not about me, man.
No, it's not. Okay, anyway, that's how I met Paul.
Yeah.
But as for me, I'm technically retired, semi-retired, as I like to say, because I'm always doing something. Right now my biggest thing is I mentor young men from the ages of third grade all the way up to college.
Okay.
We've got guys that have graduated Morehouse and on their way to medical school that we're still in contact with. We've got young men that are young as the third, fourth grade, going through middle school all the way up to high school. And we're doing our thing. Our job basically is to expose young men to what we want, or what being around a man is all about.
Right. So, but that's kind of why I brought you in today, because Chris, when we were at the school, remember I came to the academy.
The academy.
I came to the academy as a photographer. They had what day was that?
It was a Saturday. It was a weekend.
It was a job career day. Career day. I came in for that. And I saw what Chris was doing because I did not know you were mentoring at the school.
You came up to Smart Academy. Yeah,
yes, that's right. Yeah, so I came up there and we had an opportunity to talk about what was important with the kids.
Exactly.
So I wanted people to know what it's like when you created the mentoring program.
Yes.
And then is it working and what does it need?
Well, this is the thing with mentoring programs. You oftentimes you never see your results. But the beauty of mentoring young men, if you show it to them, they're going to add to it. They're going to take away from it. And if you keep it consistent, they'll take something from it anyway. Because the beauty of it is kind of like somebody says, well, I thought you didn't eat chicken. I thought you didn't eat chicken. Well, that was all that was in the kitchen. Eventually, they're going to eat it. Or if you give somebody something positive, I can give a kid 10 checklists, and if they take one item out of that checklist, we've made some progress.
Yes.
Because the reason I came with the checklist in the first place is because we had nowhere to start from.
And it becomes measurable.
It becomes measurable.
Okay, right.
So now you've got something. And kids learn a lot of different ways.
Yes.
But mostly through modeling. If I never see it, I never know it's possible. When I was a kid, I never thought, I could be an officer, I could sail a plane or fly a plane, or I could go swimming in the ocean, because that wasn't something that I saw. So you get a chance to see, we give kids a chance to see men being men working with people, doing other things. And a lot of times they don't get that opportunity. And that's a beautiful thing. What we need as a group, we always need more mentors. Because there's right now, there's about 7 of us. And each one of us brings something different to the table. And that's a wonderful thing. You never want everybody to be on the same track. One guy is religious, the other guy is not religious. One guy is a mathematician, mechanic. The other guy is a planter. He's a harvester.
Why you say that? Because they look at life from a different angle.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
We all come to the table with something different. If you got a group of guys, and if it's 3 of them in a room, and they say, hey man, look at that wall over there. Each guy is going to have a different perspective. Oh,
right.
Man, that wall ain't all that. Oh, man, that's a beautiful wall. But the beauty of it is you've got all these different perspectives. And when you're doing that with young men growing to be men, you're giving them all the opportunity. You're giving them a chance to see, hey, I could be like Mr. Chris, or I could be like Mr. Paul. You know, I could do something different than what I'm seeing.
Got you.
Because the average young kid now, if you're in elementary school, think back when you're in elementary school, it was always Miss So-and-so. You didn't have a whole lot of male teachers.
Right.
You know, like right now, 1% of the teaching population in America is men.
Right.
And then less than that 1% is black men. So we're in a situation where
We're not being represented.
We're not being represented. So you got a young black boy who's raised by a single mom in a situation. He's got little to no exposure to another man. You know, a positive.
Let me ask you a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. What is the percentage of the young men in your program don't have a dad?
About 85%.
And in that 15%, they have a dad that's absent, or they have a dad that's not functional, or they have.
It runs the gamut.
Yeah, I'm talking about because it's
Right.
different when you got one and
Exactly.
they're not effective.
Yeah,
but not having
we've
one.
got some fathers.
Yeah.
You know, that quite frankly didn't have a father themselves. So they've got this, as some women would say, hyper masculinity that they're trying to push on their young men. And so, like one of the little boys, you know, he came to me. He said, "Miss Chris, I need to talk to you." He's a middle school kid.
Yeah.
He says, "You know, my dad got mad at me." I said, "Why'd your dad get mad at you?" He said, "I told my dad my best friend is a girl, and my dad told me I couldn't have a girl as a best friend. That was weak. Do you think that's weak?" I said, "No, that's not necessarily weak." I said, "That's not weak." I said, if she's your best friend, what does she bring to the table?"
There you go. I was going to say that
Yeah.
question. Why is she your best
Why
friend?
is she your best friend?
Yes.
Man, cause if I make an A and she make a B, she right there behind me. She make an A, I make a B. We challenge each other. We got a lot in common. She play Roblox like I play Roblox. You know, we go to the same church. She lived down the street from me. You know, when I got sick, she the only somebody that came by the house to check on me.
Right.
I said, see, now that's a friend. You know, friends there's a certain amount of commonality with friends, right? You got to have that commonality. There's a certain amount of care with friends. And there's a friend that can call you out when you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's a friend. And if that friend happens to be a female, and in that middle school, come on now, their relationships to them are serious. But, you know, as a father, you can't tell your son you can't be friends with a girl.
Right.
You know, I thought that was wrong. I didn't call the father out, but I said, hey, well, your dad's got his opinion. I said, but, you know, you going to have to be your own man.
Yes.
I said, so you have to decide how you want to be this man. And I said, if that man is a friend with a girl,
Yeah.
that's just a girlfriend, fine. I said, then you got all kind of bonuses because now you just understand what the girls are thinking. You know, now she got all girlfriends, and they all looking at you like, oh, he got some sense.
Yeah.
I said, you're getting access, kind of like backstage. You got a backstage pass. You know, you don't have to just be sitting in the audience trying to get the young lady's attention. You know, now you over there when the girls are all getting together and they talking.
Yeah.
You know, I said, so that's it. You know,
So you said something earlier that we don't get to see the outcome of. Oh, hold on, let me finish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Of the mentoring program. So how do you extend that to make sure that everything you've given is being reinforced?
well, this is the deal. You know, you have a situation sometimes where it's kind of like the guy who falls off the ship and he's expecting this miracle to come save him. You know, it's like, yo, man, they threw you the raft. You know, the helicopter came, you didn't get on the helicopter. You wanted this big giant show. But the beauty of mentoring is it's the little bitty things. You know, like you'll have a kid that, you know, I'm constantly getting on about keeping his shoes tied.
Yeah.
You know? And then you'll see him, you know, with his family in the mall or something, or
You're talking about later in life.
later
Okay,
on,
that's
later
when
on.
you get it.
Right. Later on in life, you see him and his shoes are tied, or he'll run up to you and give you a big hug. You know, it brought me to tears, you know, a couple years ago. Little kid, I never thought he paid attention to me because he was not one of the kids I felt like I had a connection with.
Yes.
But I'm in Kroger and I'm shopping and, you know, I see this little boy. I didn't recognize him. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Chris." I'm like, hey.
Yeah.
You know. So he runs and him and his mom come running up to me. And, you know, I'm like,
As an adult.
yeah, he's a grown man now. And he gives me this hug. And I was like, who is this guy? He goes, "You don't know me?" I'm like, "No, sir, I don't know you. Who are you?" You know, he's, "I'm Jonathan." I'm like, "Little Jonathan?"
Little Jonathan that wouldn't tie his
Yeah,
shoe.
Little Jonathan that wouldn't tie his shoe. But now, Jonathan's he's over at Clark. He's going to school. He's in college. He got a full scholarship, all that type of stuff. And he was just happy to see me.
Yes.
I didn't recognize him, but he recognized me.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of it. And the little things that I taught him, like, hey man, listen more than you talk. Keep your shoes tied. Keep your pants up around your waist and not hanging off your butt. I said, and when you go somewhere, introduce yourself.
Yes.
One of the things we do in our little programs called Young Men Rising, we instill in the kids, like, who am I? Who are my people? Right? Who's my mother? Who's my father? Who's my grandmother? Who's my grandfather on both sides of the family?
Right.
And so that gives you have a lineage. So once you have that connection to a lineage, now you realize it's not just you. A lot of these kids, you're in the 3rd, 4th grade, you feel like, oh, the world started with me.
Yeah. No,
like,
it didn't.
No, it didn't.
It started with your grandparents.
Go have a conversation with your grandfather. A lot of them like, I don't know my granddad. I said, well, ask your mom.
Yeah. That takes me back to when I start the first workshop.
Right.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't familiar with the Change Agent program, it's a 5-series workshop where we talk about all these things that are needed for men, young men, and elders.
Right.
So I find it wow, because I never knew about the full length of your program, but the conversation about your grandparents is so important because they are the ones who created your parents.
Exactly. So
And then the isms, hold on a second.
There you go.
And then the isms your parents have come from your grandparents.
That's it.
And then you must find a way that when you're with your parents is to figure out who made them and how do they get to be in front of you.
Right.
And then isms. Now, dealing with the absence of that too, because I heard you say that these young men, if they don't have those people, what is something you say to them when they don't have those people?
When they don't have those
grandparents.
When they don't have the grandparents,
Yes.
a lot of times, you start the conversation, and you like you tell a young man, say, hey, ask your mom or your caregiver in some cases, about your grandparents, and it's like, how did I get here? Because you didn't come here by accident, accidents happen, but anyway, but you didn't come here just because. You didn't just pop up by yourself.
Right.
There was a generation before you and a generation before that. So the more you know about yourself, the more there is to love. And once you start loving on yourself, it increases your propensity to be successful. Nobody, now let's take our president. Nobody loves a loser.
Right.
And if you see yourself as a loser, it's because you don't know who all you represent.
Okay.
You don't know what team you're on.
Got you.
A lot of times the kids, they don't realize what team they're on. They're like, I ain't never thought about my grandmama. I ain't thought about my granddaddy. Or in some cases, which is really disheartening to me, I never thought about my dad. He ain't never been here. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But if you skip over daddy and you say, well, mama had a daddy, right? What is he like? He's your grandfather.
Yes.
Right? So what is he all about? And then if daddy's not there, is there an uncle there?
Looking for something to connect to, right?
Right. These kids, they want something to connect to. And as a grown man, I feel like it's a responsibility. You have to give them something to connect to. We don't want to make a whole lot of
me's.
Right.
This.
Right. We don't want to make all the mistakes I made.
Yeah.
I feel like it's my job to so the next guy doesn't do the same mess I did. Let me teach him. Let me show him.
And that's the very reason why I created the Change Agents, because I'm coming to that group of people that didn't have the mentoring.
That's it.
And now we're dads and granddads, and we don't talk about this because it's not being talked about, or it's being assumed.
It's been assumed. Yeah.
And it's not being consumed.
Yeah,
it's been assumed but not consumed.
I'll give you a time.
Go ahead.
Typically, like in my family, I didn't find out about my great grandfather until I went to his funeral, right? Mm-hmm. And then I've had the luxury of going to my mom's house and reading his obituary that I couldn't read or didn't read when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you find out this guy, he was a sharecropper. He was in the U.S. Cavalry. He did a lot of great things. He set in at the Woolworth counter.
Yes.
He was one of the first people to do that. He was one of the first black farmers that had his own farm, his own little 5 acres
Yeah.
in Dothan, Alabama, back in 1959. You know, that's something to be proud of.
Yes.
And if you're a little kid and you hear this for the first time, you're like, oh, my granddaddy was somebody.
Yes.
You know, it's almost akin to saying, gee, my dad's on the cover of Madden. You know, that
Yeah.
type of thing. Because you have to get it to where they can relate to it. You know, it's like, hey, you know, my dad or my great granddad was this person. You know, my great granddad walked with Martin Luther King, or something that they can relate to.
Yes.
And that's half the battle.
Yes.
Knowing who you are creates an experience. Knowing who
Wow.
you are gives you power.
You know, as you're saying that, Chris, and I'm thinking about how much little I know about my dad and my dad's family.
Right.
And at some point when I created this program, it's the idea that if you don't know those things,
Right.
you're going to have to start it right now.
Exactly.
You are the new
Right.
beginning. You are the fresh anchor.
That's
You
it.
are the next elder. You are because what I want is my grandsons and my grandsons' sons to talk about me.
That's it. Right.
Do you know my great granddaddy had a podcast talking about
Click,
the
boom.
legacy, talk about the legacy that I want them to have, the legacy of love and tradition,
And that's the beauty of
and the
this.
things I didn't get.
Right.
Right.
The beauty of what Paul is doing, he can go, his kids and great grandkids and great grandkids can go back in some archive
Yeah.
and find, well, that's my great granddad right there.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a wonderful thing. You know, you've got a tape, an audio, whatever, of who you were. You know,
And books.
and books.
Yes, I'm up to
So
15 books.
A lot of kids
Yes.
don't have that.
Yeah.
You know, and then they don't see themselves as doing it. We have to show them.
Yes.
You know, be the change you want to see.
See, that's why I picked Change Agent.
That's it.
And live how you want to be remembered.
Right, exactly.
Live how you want to
remembered.
be remembered, because what you're asking them to do is to start it if you haven't started it.
That's
the
it.
purpose of being a dad and a granddad and the elder is to make sure that the evolution of your bloodline
Exactly.
extends greater than you. So I don't know if my kids are going to own a broadcasting system, because this shot right here in my dining room. I don't know what level they're
Right.
going to have to do to be greater than Pawpaw.
But the seed is planted.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that now they know it can be done.
Yes.
You know, I ran track.
Yeah.
And subsequently, you know, I've had a couple of my grandsons are like, well, granddad ran track, I'm gonna run track too.
Yes.
You know, and so they it's already in their mind.
Yes.
You know, because they can go to my mother's house, their great grandmother, and they see a picture of me, a little 8x10 in my little tight shorts and my little jersey.
Yeah.
And I'm posing, you know,
Yeah.
with all my little muscles.
like 6 ounces of muscle.
Right, 6 ounces of muscle, you know, and 10 pounds of heart.
Yeah.
You know, that was the thing. So now they can see it. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? But I didn't know what my granddad did.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to go back and reread his obituary to appreciate the man.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I knew he had a kid at his burial that was younger than me.
Yes.
You know, which that was a negative.
Well, you know, what I learned is, and
Turning negatives to positives, just like from the darkness we rise up, never look back, shattering barriers, breaking through every wall. No more doubts, we stand tall and proudly call the strength within us, a fire that never dies, fueling our dreams, reaching for the skies.